We're going to get started because I know we all are very busy, but welcome to the first ever, I think, Camp Shandark webinar. We're so excited to have Meg Joyce here, and she is so incredible. Not only is she a camp mom, she is an expert in what we're talking about tonight, which is why colleges value summer camp. And I just want to start by introducing Meg. She is an independent educational consultant, and she specializes in helping students with college applications. She's an active member of the Independent Educational Consultant Association, and she holds an IEC certificate from UC Irvine. So rest assured, she's very qualified to speak about college admissions, but not only that, she is a camp mom. So she's had 2 daughters go through the program. So she understands who we are at Camp Shandark and can speak from that perspective with authority as well. So we're thrilled to have her and so grateful for her time in sharing that with us tonight. Like I said, questions are totally welcome. We're going to kind of launch into this, but feel free to interrupt as you'd like. If you'd like to throw questions into the chat, you may do that as well, because there's going to be a lot of good tidbits here for you to ponder. So feel free to interrupt. Meg, let's get started here with talking a little bit about the change in landscape in admissions. Maybe since, you know, we have our girls that are applying now, since we as their parents were applying for college, how has this changed?
It's changed quite a bit. And I'd say there's been sort of almost like 2 major periods of shifting. One was, you know, from when your parents were applying to college through, let's say, the late 20-teens, and things were definitely changing then. And then once COVID hit, things have changed again. And so, you know, to focus on the interval since COVID, you know, we have a chart up here. You can see just since that first full COVID cycle, the number of applicants is, I don't know what, we might have the old chart. Anyway, we'll figure it out. It doesn't matter. These numbers are good. Since, you know, that start of that interval, there's 25% more students applying to colleges. And 34% more applicants. This is, you know, zeroing in. This is most of the applicant pool, but not all, because this was using data from the Common App, which is the most common application platform. The majority of 4-year colleges in the United States use it. There's some notable exceptions, like the University of California system.
Where are all these new applicants coming from? Where is the surge in applications? What's the reason since COVID?
Yeah, there's many reasons, but a big one is, and I know this probably comes as a surprise to people, because you think COVID, you know, maybe people weren't coming to the United States, but they were. There's been an overall increase in international students. I say overall because in the last year, given the change in the political climate, there's actually been a decrease, but still net, it's international students are up. There's way more first generation students applying to college. Those are students whose parents didn't attend 4-year colleges. They're now, believe it or not, 1/3 of the applicant pool. And there's more lower income and underrepresented students in the applicant pool. Colleges have been really working to recruit these students, especially colleges that can afford, you know, to recruit them, and then to grant scholarships and merit aid to the students. And, you know, I want us all to be happy about all this, because even though it might make the process seem a little daunting, you know, a little more daunting, or you say, oh my gosh, this, you know, it's just, I keep hearing about it in the news, but studies show that having a variety of students in the classroom enhances the experience for everybody. So, you know, I view this as a good thing.
Well, great. Well, since we're here and talking to our upper campers, presumably first year applicants to college, what are we learning here about first year average acceptance rates?
Okay, so I bet you this chart comes as a surprise to a lot of people on the call, because there's so much in the news about, how hard it is to get into college, and, everywhere is getting harder and harder every year. And there is some truth to that. But overall, first year acceptance rates are actually on the rise. The majority of schools accept the majority of applicants. Um, I, this, I won't get into the reasons. I'd be happy to, off the call, but this is a true chart. What you're hearing, the lowered acceptance rates apply to really a very, very small subset, maybe under 100 colleges. Everywhere, on average, everywhere else, um, more students are getting into college than ever
Okay.
before.
Okay. Well, that is good news. That's good news. So next question then, with all of these applications, all of these applicants
Mhm.
into schools, how are colleges determining who they want to accept?
Yeah, that's a
That's kind
great
of getting
question.
right into it, right? Because that's what
Yeah,
we want to know.
right. When they're flooded with applications, how do they make sense of it all? Okay, so next slide. Okay, so there's a lot of data on this chart. So let me just quick step back. This is a chart that the National Association of College Admissions Counselors publishes every couple of years, that they're known as NACAC. This is the most recent one. So it's factors ranked in order of importance that admissions officers consider when they're looking at any given college application. So you can see, considerable importance. The first three things: high school grades in your college prep courses, total high school grades in all your courses, and the strength of your curriculum. In other words, the rigor of your courses, especially in light of what was available at your high school. You can't be penalized for not taking a class that wasn't offered at your high school. That's an established concept. You don't need to worry about that. Those are clearly at the top of the list. Every college, no matter what, this is the top of their factors. Some colleges more or less stop the process right there. They look at other things like recommendations and things, but they there's a grid. They really put the heaviest weight in the transcript.
Okay.
But then for schools that look more holistically at your application, and that is really a lot of colleges. It's the colleges that you read about in the news. They start looking very heavily at these other factors. And I want you to look what the very next thing is after the factors that are in your transcript. Look at this: positive character attributes. Now, I'm not saying that your teacher recommendations or your extracurricular activities or maybe your test scores don't matter. They do. But what matters way more than you might think is our character traits.
Oh, that's amazing. That's good news for us at camp.
Mhm. Yeah, it is. It is. I think camp is the perfect place to develop character. And then also, this is important whenever you're starting to get into more of these things that aren't just, laid out on a transcript. You
Mhm.
need some evidence to support what you're saying. You can't just
Yeah.
say, "I'm super honest. I'm
Yeah.
great." You need evidence. And camp provides that evidence. And Sandy and I are going to talk a lot more about that in a little bit.
Well, let's prove this very briefly, Meg, because you pulled up some mission statements from some top universities here that proves they care about values.
Yeah. Yeah. So two that immediately sprang to mind for me. So I put are Dartmouth and Duke. This
We have a
is
Duke alum on the call, Liz Rambo. Shout
Oh,
out.
terrific. Yay. Go Blue Devils. Although I shouldn't say that. I did not go there. I went to a rival. But the first paragraph of their 3-paragraph mission statement talks very much, we serve Duke University by striving to identify and enroll students who demonstrate a sense of open-mindedness, a commitment to their communities. And I love this. We seek students who make things better and treat others well. Now look
Wow,
at,
that's camp.
yeah, Yeah, it's camp. It's camp. They're coming out. This is the very first paragraph in their not very long mission statement.
Mm.
So I think that tells you something. Now look at Dartmouth. They have this Dartmouth pledge. We learn everything. We do this together. We learn together. We teach one another. We treat each other with dignity and respect. And they appreciate an honest, and civil exchange of ideas, especially conflicting ones, and that strengthens their intellect and makes for an inclusive community. They're
Wow.
coming out and telling you that they value the kinds of things that are part of, the daily menu at camp.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
yeah,
fantastic. Well,
yes,
this is a eye-opening, really, to
yeah,
me, to look at how clearly colleges are stating they value values, and then how
yes.
nicely aligned it is with our values at Camp Jeanne d'Arc. And we're going to
Hmm.
spend time now, and probably pretty much the rest of the call, talking about how we can take our camp experience, translate it into language that then is very it showcases our values to the schools that we care to be aligned with. So
Yes,
this is
yes, I
exciting.
I agree. And by the way, if you can look at mission statements, you could also go to strategic plans or vision statements. And if you really don't feel like reading very much, go to the school motto.
Okay.
Tulane's motto is a Latin phrase that translates into not for oneself. They're coming out and telling you they care about people who do things for other people,
Wow. Wow.
who do and care for other people.
That's camp spirit, that's
Yeah.
Colonel, that's our mission, that's bringing loving hearts, that's all of the above. So I love this.
Yes.
This is great.
Yes.
So we're taking this now, and we've determined that colleges care about values. And now how do colleges determine what students can best fit that description?
Yeah. Yeah.
Looking through all the applications and things, that's where we get to the meat of this discussion, really.
Yes. Okay, so I agree. So go to the next slide. Um, Great. So, we've already talked about what we mean by character, things like kindness, empathy, compassion, resilience. It's also things like mentoring, teaching younger kids, and showing curiosity. So how do they get to it? So they have your application and they have the other pieces of your application that you don't submit, but your school does. Things like teacher
Mm.
recommendations, counselor recommendations. In your college application, I don't know how many of you have taken a look at the Common App or any other way of looking at a common application. But, in addition to just name, address, phone number, and a list of like classes that you're taking this year in high school, two big components of that are your extracurricular activity list. You get to list 10 activities and with descriptions about what was meaningful about that activity, and the essays.
Mm.
I'm
That's
willing to
it.
bet,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Okay.
So the essays, there's two main kinds of essays. One is the, famous Common App essay that I think everybody has heard of these days. It is, a 650 word essay that you will send to all of your colleges. And what's it is nerve-wracking. It is a lot of work. Coming up with a topic can be challenging. And I do help students with that, by the way. But you know, if you've done a good job with your Common App essay, your most essential defining qualities will come through pretty loud and clear just by some stories that you tell. You
Mm.
don't hit the reader over the head. You don't come out and say, I'm this, I'm that, I'm wonderful. You tell them stories that illustrate some really key qualities about yourself.
Okay, so you're showing who you are through
Yes,
stories in that Common
yes.
App essay. And we definitely make stories at camp, not create
Mhm.
stories, but we experience life that lend us to stories.
Oh, 100%, 100%. So yeah. So, let me just, little pro tip here. Um, to get, just diverting from camp a little bit, like when you in your application, I want you to be thinking about the character that you've developed at camp, bringing that into your school life, like not just leaving it at camp.
Hmm.
So, like in your teacher recommendations, I have, heard of teacher recommendations where the teacher really did write things like this student was the one person who there was somebody in the class that nobody was ever wanted to be a lab partner with. This student
Mm,
just always did it. This student always, um, did projects with the student who didn't seem to have a friend in the class. Um, please take your camp things that that start to come very naturally at camp and bring
mm.
them into your real life, because they will come into your application in sneaky ways that you might not even realize. Like
Okay.
you're just going to be that kind of a person who does these wonderful things.
Okay, so striving for consistency in your
Yes,
camp life and your home life. Okay, that's a great pro tip.
yes, yes.
Great. All right,
Okay.
so you talked about the Common App essay, and now I gather there is another kind of essay that allows us to really showcase who we are.
Yes. So that's what commonly known as supplemental essays, or some people call them college specific essays.
Okay.
So we can go to the next slide. Not every college will ask you to write a supplemental essay, but I've never had a student go through the college application process without having to write at least a dozen of them, sometimes a couple dozen of them. So
And before
so
anybody feels like we're done and this is the end of their time here on this webinar, we're about ready to take these supplemental essay prompts and insert different camp scenarios to give you a
yes,
little bit of guidance. So that's our goal in the next little bit here, is to go through the kinds of essay prompts and then what specific Camp Jeanne d'Arc activities or programs would slip nicely into a response in one of these essays.
yeah, yeah. So supplemental essays fall into about 5 or 6 common sort of buckets. A very common one is why this major. So what I've done is I've just taken some actual essay prompts. This University of Texas Austin asks, why are you interested in the major you indicated as your first choice major? So there's a concept called fit to major. Um, University of Texas at Austin is actually particularly known for focusing on it, but really there's many, many, many colleges for whom this is important. When I was applying to college a very long time ago, it was sufficient to say, I'm good at math. Therefore, you should consider me as a serious candidate for your business, for your undergraduate business school. Um, it's not really the case anymore. It's important to have supporting evidence to back up your claim that you would be an awesome candidate for their business school. So, how are some ways you might do that? And you might be saying, how can I get business experience at camp?
Yes.
And I'm going to say, actually, this might be one of the scenarios that most lends itself to camp, I'm
Is
going to
this a
say you
good
can,
time to
yeah,
interject, Meg, an
it
example?
is. It is.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here and use an example from last summer. One of our owls, Ella, she did a legacy project. This might be new to some of you. Legacy project is a camper-led project at camp where they have the invitation to identify something they see at camp that they want to change or that they want to create. And so for Ella, she looked around and identified that reading is a really important part of our culture at camp, but we don't really have a really accessible library. We do have lots of books at camp, but we don't have a real accessible library. So she designed a plan, outlined all of the steps to accomplish this vision that she had of creating a little learning library. So she sketched out a drawing. She worked with our maintenance crew to get it built. She painted it, she designed it, impressive also is she solicited the funds. So we allow the girls to create a video. We put it on our Instagram where they say, here's what I'm doing. Here's why I'm doing it. Here is what I need. Here's what my budget is dictating I need to accomplish this. Would you help? And so she even, you know, works on collecting the donation and then sees the project through to coordinating a team of helpers, seeing it through to the finish, and then, you know, project complete. And what an incredible example of someone who sets out a plan, a project plan, sees it through from beginning to end. Do you think that would be a great example of something to include on an essay like this?
I think it would be fantastic.
Okay.
I think it would be fantastic. And oftentimes, like, these kind of, you know, why are you interested in this major? I advise students to kind of just tell your story, kind of start at the beginning and work your way through. So maybe this was her first or second experience, but, you know, she would lay this out, and then I'm going to guess you know, a student like Ella probably has done some other things outside of camp as well that she could include. But like, this would be the perfect example of something to use in a why this major. I mean, she basically had like a mini Shark Tank experience, you know, at camp.
That's one of my favorites, by the way.
Yeah,
Big
it's pretty
Shark Tank
popular in our house too. So I think that would be fantastic. I've got some other ideas. I don't know if you do, Sandy, for, you know, for examples that very much relate to camp for why this major.
Not specifically as far as a, you know, but I can think of some potential, you know, examples of someone who might spend time, you know, in the garden, for example, have their first exposure to growing a garden, cultivating the seeds, tending to it, and then have this experience of, this is something I really want to continue on. Actually, I do have another example. Liz is on the call, and her sister Molly, she was exposed to sailing at camp, and she just kind of fell in love with it and went on for many years to teach sail and to you know, cultivate that skill, and helped her open a lot of doors, not to mention just the love of something amazing in your life. You know, so I think all of these things are great examples, and there's like countless numbers of examples. Yeah.
I can also think, you know, Jeanne d'Arc in particular is very international camp. So, you know, maybe camp led you to have an interest in other cultures. Maybe, you know, that leads to an interest in wanting to study sociology or anthropology, which are the study of groups and cultures. Maybe it leads you to want to study Spanish. You know, you worked on your Spanish, you had some, you know, roommates from a Spanish speaking country, or maybe that leads to an interest in Latin American studies as your major. Like,
is there
it's
anybody
really pretty infinite?
Yeah, it is. Anybody on the call, any camp alums on the call, pipe in if you had this kind of experience where you were exposed to something at camp that led to maybe your first choice of a major. You definitely pipe in, and we'll move on, but you go ahead and pipe in if you have something to add.
Yeah. So the next one you might be looking at, like, okay, why this college? How does that relate to camp? You know, I chose one of your neighbors, UVM, not too far away. But I like to say that the subtext behind every essay prompt that you will encounter at any point in the college search and application process, the subtext to that is, tell us about yourself. They know about themselves. They want to know about you. So you can talk about something that you did at Jeanne d'Arc, like a legacy project or an interest that first took shape at Jeanne d'Arc, and then use that in your why this college essay. I'll use, you know, a brief example of somebody I worked with who he was a boy, so he didn't go to Camp Jeanne d'Arc, but he developed an interest. His camp experience led him actually to an interest in engineering, and not in the way you might think, not because he started becoming like the handyman around camp, but because he was on a canoeing trip with his camp and he noticed that you know, as far as the eye could see, it was all burned. And it was due to a campfire that, burned out of control because it was just an unusually dry summer in the
Mhm.
Adirondacks. And he attributed that to climate change. So he took that home with him and started clubs, dedicated to picking up trash. He wrote newsletters, and eventually he worked in a lab that engineered sustainable materials. And that led him to become interested in chemical engineering and materials
So
engineering.
cool. What a
This
great full
experience
circle.
at camp.
Yeah.
And so he actually very much did in Why This College Essays. He's a current student. We're still hearing, all the places that he's being accepted at. But he actually started in his opening lines with his experience at camp and what that led to, and then linked that to the college's um, chemical engineering programs or materials engineering, and just their commitment, certain colleges, to becoming carbon neutral, and
Oh, that's great.
sharing his vision of saving our planet.
So, Meg, let's do a little comparison. So, let's say you're comparing that kind of essay where that applicant comes across with this camp experience as their essay content versus if they had had a different kind of experience. I went to environmental
Mhm.
engineering, camp, or I went to this, there's a lot of academic programs that students can do in the
Yep.
summertime. Is there a way to kind of compare these experiences as far as how they're going to do on an essay and how they're going to translate? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to say it's not what you do, it's what meaning you take out of it and what you do
Mm.
with it after. So, so there's not a hierarchy
Yeah, okay.
of, it's better to have gone to the academic program than camp. No, in some many ways, I could argue that some of these really interesting experiences stand out because they're not what everybody else did.
Yeah.
Um, so I,
Well, think about how boring, maybe a little biased, but that essay, I went to engineering, class for 4 weeks. I sat in a
yeah,
classroom and learned about engineering versus this real world life
yeah,
experience. But you're right. It's what that camper, that student did when they come home. They made an
yes,
observation, they had an exposure, and
right,
then they were able to lay that all out in the essay to
yeah,
to show who they are, which is what you keep coming back to. Like, whatever you're telling me, make sure it's a reflection on who I am, because that's what they're trying to get down to the bottom of is the colleges. Who is this
e-
person?
every bit of it. I think that's a mistake. That's a mistake that a lot of students make. Is like the colleges know about themselves. They don't know about you.
Hmm.
Spend, yes, you do, ultimately you need to link yourself to why you and the college are such a good match, why certain
Okay.
programs
Okay.
that they have or opportunities, you're so perfect for them. But in terms of the amount of time that you spend talking about yourself versus them, I way more time about yourself.
Okay, that's great. Well, speaking of yourself,
Mhm.
let's go on to the community and identity supplemental essay prompt.
Yes.
What
Um,
is that? What am I
So,
doing with
okay,
that?
so I group these together. So if you look at like Elon, very plainly says, what aspect of your identity do you find most meaningful and why? Um, and you might be like, well, why do you have the University of Miami thing where they say reflect on a community or experience that has influenced you? What significance did it hold for you? They seem kind of different. And on the surface, they do. But when you start to work on a lot of these essays over time, you realize actually you can use sort of what it is you can use you can talk about the same thing in both of these essays.
For sure.
So,
Yes.
so let's pretend Ella, who built
I
the
might
ride
have a good
here.
example though, Meg. I might have a
Oh,
good
good.
new
Go.
example. Let me
Go.
pull
I'm
this
all.
up because this is an alum. Her name's
Mhm.
Caroline McConney. We're actually going to go visit her in Puerto Rico
Awesome.
in a few days. She is currently the president of RIMCO, which is the Caterpillar dealer, like cat, like the big
Yeah.
equipment, the big heavy equipment for Puerto Rico, Cuba, and the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and the Eastern Caribbean islands. She is a woman in a very male-dominated field
Yeah.
of construction vehicles. And
Hmm.
she credits Camp Jeanne d'Arc for being a key force in her life for building her confidence. She learned how to speak up and test herself. She learned, and I love this, she was went for senior mount and she was working towards senior mount. And she said camp gave her the opportunity to be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah.
And it says it gave her the ability to overcome fear and be confident in herself. And that gave her that confidence that she needs to be a leader, a world-class leader in a male-dominated industry. So
Yes.
do you think that fits this category?
Yes. So here's what I see. So, part of my French, but like that's very badass. Good for her.
Yeah.
So here's what I see. So obviously, it very plainly answers, what significance did the community or experience? The community is your all girls camp. Being in this all girls environment
Mm-hmm.
that was just like this not it was more than a safe space. It was a space that where you felt comfortable taking risks
Yeah.
and maybe trying things that you'd never tried before and that were out of your comfort zone.
Yeah.
What aspect of your identity do you find most meaningful and why? Okay, there's multiple ways you could approach that. You camper. It could be camper, it could be member of a strong female community, right? There's many different ways you could approach that. And so, but she'd be talking about the same thing. She might be talking about her experience at camp and going on
Mm-hmm.
this mount
Mm-hmm.
trip. To answer either one of those questions, you just sort of tweak your wording so that,
Yeah.
you do have to be careful and make sure you're clearly answering what they've asked. So,
Sure.
I help students make sure they're doing that. But even I was thinking of like Ella, who built the library. Okay, what aspect of she could answer the Elon question about her identity. Her identity might be she's a reader,
Mm-hmm.
and
True.
right? And what that led to.
Mm-hmm.
And then her community, she could even use that same right, what she's already written about before, a community or experience that's influenced you. She could be a community of readers, and she then she's from the community of readers, and she talks about her camp experience building the library and starting a new generation of readers.
So I love
um
this. So you can kind
right.
of approach this backwards. You can kind of say,
Yes.
okay, here is a formative experience that I have had at
Right.
camp or otherwise that showcases who I am
Yes.
and the depth of who I am and how I've grown and what I could potentially bring to a college. Let me
Yes.
now find the right essay to best fit the example that I want to share.
Exactly. Like as I'm working with students, we spend a lot of time. It's definitely the thing that takes up the most time. If I examine how hours get used, it's essays.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and we started backwards. I spent a lot of time getting to know students, asking a lot of questions, finding out about their experiences, their backgrounds, and just making notes of like things like this could be a good topic, that could be a good topic.
Mm.
Um, and
Oh,
then
good.
the prompts you sort of match them to the prompt, you know?
Cool. Speaking of prompts,
Yeah.
let's move on to the next slide because I know
Mhm.
these are our last three kind of essay prompt examples, and then we want to open it up if anybody has any questions before we wrap up.
Yes. Okay, so navigating across differences. This is a really important thing. Going back to Dartmouth, Lee Coffin will often come out and say, he's like, we're a community in the woods. And he says that because we need to get along. We want to be, I want to have a diverse community and we need to get along. In fact, I was just at NYU today. I did not do this on purpose, I promise, but I was just at NYU today, and it is a very diverse community there. So that's another like pro tip. Just by the questions that a college asks, they're giving you a clue of what's important to them, and and what it's like there, and what their school is like. So NYU had one question this year, and it was about, tell us about a time you encountered a perspective different from your own. What did you learn about yourself, the other person, or the world? Having just been at NYU, wasn't my first time, but there today, I was reminded this is a very diverse place. Of course, they ask this question.
Interesting. So
So
Meg, in order to apply at NYU, you have to answer that specific question. You don't have the option of submitting a question of your choice.
it's optional, but as I
Okay.
like to say, it's optional if you don't mind not getting in.
Yeah, I
Um,
see.
and that's what most of these questions are. There are some questions that are truly optional, but not, the standard supplemental essay questions.
Well, I'd love to interject an example from one of our alum here
Yeah.
that I think fits perfectly. Some of our younger alums that are on the call might remember Grace Franco. She at first attended camp in 2011, and then she was there for many, many years. She was the Le Pucelle captain. She received the Lorraine Trophy as well.
Mhm.
And she also went out for clubs, built rainy day fires, and had many camp experiences that really shaped her. But she talked about learning the basics of diplomacy at camp,
Yeah.
and how to interact with and respect those from different backgrounds. She said she remembers a cabin mate that was from Venezuela and whose family was dealing with political unrest at home, including severe shortages. And the end of the summer, that camper packed a bag with extra toilet paper to bring home to her family, which is incredible. She got to see firsthand how global circumstances affected others. And
Yes.
just incredible. Well, Grace went on to serve as the travel manager for the White House under the Biden administration for 2023. And she held that role for 2 years. And so I love how this translates
Yes.
her exposure to diplomacy at camp translates to who she is and what she went off to do.
Yes.
What a great example.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's like a particularly good thing about Jeanne d'Arc is, you guys come from all over. You come from all over the
Mm-hmm.
country. You come from all over the world. And it's not just you, your counselors do as well.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
so I think it gives you an experience that is really quite unique.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Great. Tell me
yes.
about activities and other.
Okay, so activities, this is a common one. I put Georgetown has 4 questions. This is one of their 4. And I always encourage students to get to the significant, by now you've probably deduced, I want you to get to the significance of the activity. It's not just what you did, but it's also why you did it. So, thinking back to Ella, she did that because she's a reader and what she's gotten out of reading. She might want to put a little something, if she was writing an essay about this, I'd probably encourage her to maybe write about a formative reading experience, or just all the things that she's learned, by having her nose in a book. So it's not only about, what you did, but why you did it. Maybe she's noticed her friends aren't really reading anymore, and it's a pity. And what you got out of it.
That's
what,
great.
how things were better or different. Colleges are really trying to get to how is their campus, how are their classrooms going to be better because you're in them.
Okay, so how would Ella
Yeah,
continue that then if she said, I see this, I see my friends in their phones, I feel really sad that I don't see more people reading. I
right.
saw this as an important part of our culture at camp. I designed this project. I went through and developed this and I succeeded and did this. How does she translate that then to her campus, Georgetown, if she's applying to
Yeah.
Georgetown? How does she then say, and therefore you should accept me at Georgetown?
She doesn't need to. It'll speak for
Okay.
itself. She doesn't
Okay.
need to. She can leave it as um the library's still, maybe the library's still in existence, or now people are bringing books with them that they read during the school year, um to stock the library with, or maybe camp now has book clubs, that
Mhm,
all the
mhm.
students who were reading over the summer, now there's like some book clubs that meet a couple times a year, off cycle. So she does not need. I actually sort of, I don't want to say avoid, but sort of like the way you might end an essay in your essays at school, where
Mhm.
you do need to wrap things up with a
A
bow.
therefore blank, like,
Yes. You can let it speak for, sometimes a little, there's a logical sort of nice, circling back sort of ending. But oftentimes you can just sort of let it speak for itself and end it.
I like that. Good.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
gonna see within that example, it's speaking for itself, the impact that you have
Yes.
made, or
They'll
yeah.
they'll look at this as, this is someone who's doing good things, who has curiosity. Um, readers are, a dying breed.
Mhm.
And, every college loves a reader. So it's enough. She's seen, and if she did translate it outside of school, if she started a book club or something like that, or maybe volunteers at the library at home, or goes and reads at a senior center, reads
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
people who can't read so easily anymore. Um, I would add all that stuff in, and then I would just sort of walk away. And the other
This
thing is,
is
don't forget, these have word count limits that
okay, yeah.
that do sort of put a lid on how carried away you get with, rapid with the grand conclusion.
Okay, so pro tip on length, like should a student use exactly the number of words that they're allotted, or is it appreciated to turn in something less? What do you think?
You should get pretty close. So what
Okay,
typically happens when I'm working on essays with students, they're way too long. I want essays to be too long. It's so much easier to trim than it
mm,
is to build it. One of the last things we do is cut it down to size. We do
okay,
that pretty much at the bitter end. So what almost always happens is, frequently, if it's a 250 word allowed essay, we're at 250 words or 249, because
okay,
we started that meeting at 350 and then we cut it down, and then
yeah,
said, so pro tip, some of these really long ones, I would get to within, 10 words or 10 or 20 words of what they say.
okay. Great tip. Great
Yeah.
tip. Well, great. Well, anything in closing that you want to add here about other? I mean, is this
Yeah.
really a category? Can't you usually find one of those others? Or does it
Yeah.
matter? Like, do you have to say, I am selecting to write on, check the box, navigating across differences? Do you have to
Yeah.
select one of these, or is this just something that you're offering, which is good, like optional categories?
So, okay. So that's a really good question. So, many colleges there's sort of two models. Some are, here's two essay prompts, you need to answer both of them, and you say,
Mm,
okay. And you figure out, you look at your material, the things that you've been writing on, and you figure out what you're going to say where. And then other colleges like Villanova this year had a choice of 5 essays.
mm,
I love those. And pro tip, don't start with your Villanova essay, because by the time you've worked on some other schools, I can pretty much guarantee one of your essays will do a good job of responding to one of those 5 prompts.
Okay.
So rather than being overwhelmed by what do I talk about for X, Y, or Z,
Mm.
push that one aside, work on others. But so some colleges will have, so Virginia Tech has had, I think it was 4 short answer essays, like 120 words apiece. This is one of their 120 word prompts, said share a time of something you're really proud of, where you were a role model. It's kind of a random one. I haven't seen other ones like that, but you could easily use an example from camp here.
Well,
Maybe where you led, yeah.
let me
Yeah.
interject here because one of our alum, Nicole Epps, we featured her in Blue Sparks, and she talks about how camp really provided her opportunities to step up and be a leader and build confidence. And she talked about a senior Mount Club trip. And usually on those club trips, we have to like contrive some kind of emergency so that the camper going out for the club has a chance to showcase their skills and their leadership. Well, it actually, they didn't need to do that this time because on her trip, someone stepped into a bee's nest of some sort, and a swarm of angry bees were unleashed, and one camper was stung multiple times, and Nicole stepped up and supported the campers as well as calmed everyone else. And she just recounts how formative that experience was for her journey in becoming the leader that she is now. And she is the chief operating officer, a financial officer at Brooklyn Org. And so, and I'm not sure if she's still there, but as of this article, she was. And, just what an awesome example to pull into that essay about stepping up as a leader, formidable
100%.
experience.
100%. So like, if there's something, another thing I'd love for you guys to take away from this is, you don't have to have cured cancer to have good essay material.
Great. Yeah, great point.
There's things that these are good experiences, and these are things like everybody can relate to. Like that is an essay worthy topic, what you just wrote, what you just said, especially something like shorter like this, absolutely. That is a perfect topic. I had a student, I had a student who was wrote about, as a camp leader, he was like a junior counselor, and he was taking students on, a big long hike, and one of the older campers had secretly taken some items out of his backpack and moved them into other campers' backpacks, so thereby lightening his load and making the other campers' loads heavier. And the junior counselor caught him doing this, and he let the other counselors know, and all the other counselors wanted to make a very big deal out of this, and make the student apologize, make everybody know about it. And the student that I worked with said he knew what that camper needed was a second chance, and so he kept it quiet. He convinced the other counselors, let's let him have his dignity. This is not who he is. It was a weak moment. Let's give him a second chance. And sure enough, that other camper rose to the occasion. And I think that's another great thing that's, gets right back to character. Are you the kind of person that wants to make that wants to escalate things and, start World War III? Or are you going to give somebody a second chance? I know who I want on my college campus.
Yeah. Good point. So, well, yeah. Meg, maybe I'm gonna do my 30-second recap of the entire webinar. You're gonna correct me if I miss any major points here, and then we're gonna open up for any questions, or I would say also testimonials, because I know we had a couple on here that said, I did that, I used PAMP on my college essay, and to hear about their experience. So recap for me is, it's no joke applying for college.
True.
You need to stand out as an applicant by showcasing who you are.
Yes. I'm going to minimize the standout. You need to make an impression,
Okay, great.
because I feel the burden is just too high. How can you stand out among, thousands of applicants? That's not a realistic thing, but make a good impression that stays with the reader.
Love that. Great. Character counts.
True.
Character counts.
Yeah.
And it counts so much that it's coming right on the list. It's coming right under academics, and it's
Yes.
coming ahead of other extracurriculars, including sports.
Yes.
Character counts, and camp showcases character. Camp
Yes.
experiences can be used to showcase your character and values really well in an admissions essay.
100%. 100%.
Therefore,
Well done.
it's
A+.
therefore it's valuable to come to camp,
Yeah.
and it's valuable to keep coming to camp as an older camper, because that's a debate I think a lot of families have, is when is it time to stop camp and go do something else that might provide you an experience to really showcase your value to school. Well, we just kind of laid it out,
Yeah.
didn't we?
Yes, yes. And there are still 40 something other weeks in this, in the year, even if you do go to camp. It's not now or never if you have some ideas. And I know believe me, I work teenager hours. I know how busy you all are. But I would urge you, if camp is your happy place and camp fills your cup and camp makes it easier for you to be happy about, all the things that you do during the school year, please keep going to camp.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, that's great. Well, I'm going to open it up. We have just, maybe 4 or 5 minutes for questions and or comments of anybody that's on the call. So you can throw something in the chat. You can just unmute yourself and share or ask. We would love that. So anybody? Nora, are you still here? Because I know that you said that you wrote. Would you like to share briefly? Yeah. Just say who you are, maybe where you're from, and like briefly your camp experience and how you used it.
Okay, so I'm Nora. I'm from Boston. I spent around 6 years as a camper at Camp Jeanne d'Arc, and then this coming summer will be my 2nd year as a counselor. So I wrote my college essay about camp, actually. And I started off by saying how camp really shaped me into who I am today. Like kind of like relating around the message of personal growth comes from stepping into discomfort and learning to believe in yourself, often because someone else believed in you first. So I related it back to, I didn't enjoy camp my first year, but I gave it a second chance because there was an upper camper who did believe in me and showed me what camp was like, what its message stood for. And then how I kind of took that and then I like channeled that in a way to other campers who were in similar shoes that I was in. And I showed it through multiple examples. Just how whether it was going out for a senior club or being team captain or being an eclaireux, and how I learned that when I have repeated failure, like I didn't get my senior club on my first try. It's a hard thing to do, obviously. It's not about lack of ability. It's more about self-doubt and how confidence is learned. I talked about how true leadership develops over time and it comes from perseverance and empathy for others. And then also, I kind of took it from the eclaireux poem itself, of the line that says, pass it on, and showing how, from what I learned into becoming a counselor and just being there for those campers that I saw myself in as well. And so
Nora, thank you.
Yeah.
Meg, what do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, I think that's great. I think colleges really, really like to see not, obviously your personal growth, but also how you're sharing it with others. They love to see, so I think that's so great. It sounds like you did a really, really good job. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
that's
you.
awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Nora. You're passing it on still. Awesome. Well, listen, Meg, any last parting thoughts before I tell everybody how they can hear more from you and how they can connect with you if they want?
No, just, basically what I was just saying, which is, if camp is important to you, and if camp is something that, really makes you a happy, fulfilled person, I mean, you know, I, I think you should go. One of the thing, this college application process is pretty rigorous, and everything that you're thinking about and trying to do during the school year. And I think, the sort of, the airplane, oxygen mask thing. If camp is your oxygen mask and it gives you, it not only, provides these amazing experiences that are valuable to colleges, but it gives you the energy to keep doing that the rest of the year. I think
Right.
it's kind of a no-brainer to me.
Yeah. Well, I think you summed it up so well. Again, thank you so much, Meg, for sharing all
You're
of your
welcome.
knowledge, all of your experience. If anybody should want to connect with you, you run your own company called Forest Street College Counseling. Forest
Yes.
Street, like trees, Forest
Yes.
Street College
Yes.
Counseling. Just look you up online. You also work with Admissions Village. That's another
Yes.
company
That's
that you
another
work
company. Yes, I've got my
Yeah.
Forest Street contact information. You could take a photo on the next slide, but you could also look up. So I kind of keep Forest Street College Counseling intentionally small because it's me. Sometimes my son helps with some essay editing, but I really do primarily all the work. Admissions Village, people can work a lot with me, but it's a team concept there, and I really like that as well. So I find, for me, I like having both aspects. I get a lot, I like having colleagues. I like seeing what they're working on. But I think you're welcome to call my, if you're interested in talking to me about more, you have questions, or you just want to hear more about what does someone like me do and how can I help you, I'd be happy to talk to you and talk some more about it.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thanks everybody for coming. This is fun. I think my mind is reeling now with like, what other wonderful webinars can we present to our families and to our campers to help them succeed? Because in the end, we're all about being a community to help build strong girls, and whatever we can do to support them is our life's mission. So thank you for being here. I'm going to put this video out at some point so that you can share the recording with someone. Maybe you're thinking about somebody sitting here thinking, there's someone else I know that could really use all this information. I was talking to a friend and they were stressed about college. Send this video on or give them the highlights. Thanks again. Thanks, Meg.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. It really was a pleasure.
It was fun. All right, everyone.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Thanks.